The hyena's jaw closes with 4 times the force of a lion's bite. It doesn't just kill prey, it erases them. Bones, hooves, skulls, all of it folded into dust. In the African savannah's brutal economy, that jaw is currency. It is power. It is dominance. It says nothing survives this. And then a honey badger walks out of the dark, not running, not retreating, walking, 12 kilograms of animal against 90, and the hyena, the bone crusher, the apex scavenger, the creature that laughs while it hunts hesitates. This isn't a freak moment caught on a wildlife camera. This is documented behavior, repeated, observed, studied, and every single time, scientists watching this interaction arrive at the same unsettling conclusion. The honey badger should not win this confrontation. Every law of biology says so. Size, mass, jaw strength, skeletal density, the hyena dominates all of it by a factor that shouldn't even make this a contest. But nature doesn't care about laws. It cares about what works, and what the honey badger does has been working for millions of years. To understand what happens when these two animals collide, you first have to understand what a honey badger actually is, because the name is almost offensively misleading. It sounds soft, pastoral, like something that should be living near a beehive in a children's story. The reality is closer to a biological weapon with fur. Mellivora capensis. The honey badger belongs to the Mustelidae family, the same evolutionary lineage as wolverines, otters, and weasels. But somewhere along its evolutionary journey, the honey badger diverged into something almost categorically different. It became a creature designed, above all else, to be impossible to kill. Not fast, not large, not venomous, not even particularly strong by raw force standards. Just impossible to kill. The skin. That's where it starts. A honey badger's skin is roughly 6 millimeters thick and extremely loose, not in the way a normal animal's skin might have some elasticity, but genuinely, architecturally loose. It's attached to the body with such minimal connective tissue that when a predator grabs the badger by the back or the scruff, the badger can physically rotate inside its own skin. It can turn around inside the grip of a predator's jaws and bite back before the predator understands what's happening. Wildlife biologist Keith Peck, who spent years tracking honey badger behavior across South Africa, documented this exact response in field conditions. A leopard, an animal that kills by precise cervical vertebrae compression, grabbed a honey badger by the back of the neck, the standard killing grip, the one that works on nearly everything. The badger twisted inside its own skin, faced the leopard's throat, and the encounter ended with the leopard releasing and withdrawing. That's not luck. That's an evolutionary design decision made across millions of years of trial, error, and survival pressure. Add to that a layer of subcutaneous fat that acts as a natural shock absorber, a skeletal density disproportionate to its size, and claws built for excavating through hardened African clay at a rate that would exhaust a man with a shovel, and you start to understand that the honey badger isn't just resilient, it's engineered for conflict. And it picks fights, deliberately, almost strategically. Documented encounters show honey badgers challenging lions, chasing leopards off kills, and holding ground against African wild dogs in full pack pursuit. These aren't accidents. These aren't desperate last stands. Behavioral analysis suggests that the honey badger has learned over evolutionary time that aggression itself is a survival tool, that if you are relentless and painful enough, almost any predator will eventually decide the energy cost isn't worth it. Which brings us to the hyena. There is a sound the spotted hyena makes that field researchers often describe as uniquely unsettling even after years of fieldwork, not the laugh. Everyone knows the laugh, that rising, almost human cackle that carries across the savannah at night and triggers something ancient and uncomfortable in the human brain. The sound I'm describing is quieter, more deliberate. It's the sound of a femur, the largest, densest bone in most mammals, being compressed between a hyena's molars until it fractures. A low, grinding, cracking sound, like structural failure. The spotted hyena, Crocuta crocuta, generates between 800 and 1000 newtons of bite force at its carnassial teeth, a figure that places it among the highest bite force to body weight ratios of any terrestrial carnivore on Earth. To put that in perspective, a spotted hyena can consume and digest parts of an animal carcass that lions, leopards, cheetahs, and wild dogs simply leave behind, not because they don't want them, but because their jaws cannot process them. Hyenas eat hooves. They eat horn bases. They eat the dense, marrow-rich sections of long bones that other predators crack open and leave the shards of, and their digestive system running an extremely alkaline stomach acid environment can break down bone mineral content that would cause intestinal blockage in virtually any other carnivore. This is why hyena's scat is white, calcium residue from digested bone. And this jaw isn't just a feeding tool, it's a weapon. Hyenas kill large prey wildebeest, zebra, topi through what researchers describe as sustained bite pressure on the hindquarters, often while the prey is still running. They don't always go for the throat. They don't always deliver a precise killing blow. Sometimes they just hold on and consume while the prey is still alive. In terms of clan dynamics, the spotted hyena operates within one of the most sophisticated and ruthlessly enforced social hierarchies in the carnivore world. Clans can range from a handful of individuals to groups of 80 or more, governed by a matriarchal structure where dominant females physically outrank all males, often with larger bodies and higher androgen levels during fetal development, a hormonal environment so extreme that females spot it. Hyenas develop external pseudo-male anatomy. The hierarchy is enforced constantly through greeting rituals, submission postures, and when necessary, direct physical violence. A clan at a kill is organized chaos with an iron framework underneath it. Now picture a honey badger walking into the edge of that. The encounter typically begins the same way, not with the honey badger stumbling onto the hyena. With the honey badger smelling something, a carcass, a food source, a cache, and moving toward it with the kind of purposeful, low-slung stride that experienced field researchers have described as almost arrogant. The honey badger's center of gravity sits extremely low to the ground. Its legs are short and muscular, and it moves with its chest nearly parallel to the earth, head forward, slightly swinging. It doesn't skulk, it doesn't creep, it commits. The hyena, whether solitary or accompanied, initially responds the way most predators respond to something unfamiliar in their space. It assesses, circles at a distance, reads the body language, and the body language it's reading says something that doesn't fit its threat recognition framework. There's no submission, no deflection, no attempt to flee or defer. The honey badger holds its line and, if pressed, advances. This is the first psychological fracture in the interaction. The hyena's threat assessment is based on categories prey behavior, competitor behavior, predator behavior. The honey badger doesn't fit any of them cleanly. It's too small to be a serious competitor by any physical metric, but it isn't behaving like prey, and that ambiguity creates hesitation. Hesitation is the honey badger's first victory, but let's not romanticize this. If the hyena, particularly a hyena confident in its own assessment, decides to close the distance and bite, what happens next is genuinely remarkable. The hyena's jaw closes on the honey badger. The bite force that fractures femur bones drives into the badger's back, shoulders, or haunches. And the badger's skin, that extraordinarily loose architectural anomaly, begins to redistribute the pressure. The grip that should immobilize the animal instead finds itself sliding, shifting, unable to compress the vital organs and structures it needs to reach to cause systemic damage. Meanwhile, the honey badger still inside the grip is rotating. This isn't a slow process. Field footage and documented encounters show the rotation happening in seconds. The badger twists to face the direction of the bite, and without the jaw pressure having achieved any critical damage, it begins its counterattack. The target selection is precise and consistent across documented encounters. The underbelly, the groin, the inner thighs, the legs. These are the anatomically vulnerable zones on any large carnivore areas where the skin is thinner, where major blood vessels run close to the surface, where nerve clusters and sensitive tissue are accessible. The hyena's legs carry the weight of an animal that can be 90 kilograms or more. The inner thigh on a spotted hyena is not armored. It is not prepared for focused, relentless attack. And the honey badger's teeth, though not as imposing as a hyena's in rock-crushing power, are sharp, designed for cutting through bone and hide, and delivered with muscular precision from an extremely low anchored body position. The hyena cannot get leverage. Its size, the very advantage that should define this interaction, becomes a problem. It can't bring its full jaw force to bear on an animal this small, this low, and this mobile beneath it. It's like trying to crush something by sitting on it, but the thing keeps moving and biting your legs. The pain response kicks in. The hyena lifts a leg, breaks stance, loses positional advantage. The honey badger doesn't stop. Here is where the honey badger's most psychologically disturbing trait enters the equation. There is compelling behavioral evidence and some neurobiological reasoning that honey badgers experience pain at a functional threshold significantly different from most mammals. This isn't mythological invincibility. This is a measurable behavioral pattern observed across decades of fieldwork. When a honey badger is bitten hard by a large predator, it continues the encounter. It doesn't flees, it doesn't retreat into a defensive posture and wait for the threat to pass. It escalates. Some field researchers have described this as a near absence of pain-inhibited behavior. Whether this represents actual physiological pain suppression, an extremely high neurological threshold, or behavioral conditioning through evolutionary pressure is still actively studied. But the observed outcome is consistent. The honey badger absorbs damage that would end most encounters for most animals, and it uses that damage, the position it's in, the proximity to the attacker, as an opportunity. This is, from a predator psychology standpoint, completely destabilizing. Predators, even apex ones, operate on a feedback loop. They apply pressure. The prey responds with distress signals, submission postures, or physiological shutdown. Those signals tell the predator the strategy is working. It's a system refined across millions of years of coevolution. The honey badger breaks the feedback loop. There are no submission signals. There is no shutdown. There is only continued aggression regardless of what the predator does. And most predators, including the spotted hyena, are not behaviorally equipped to process that response. Their threat matrix doesn't have a category for prey that keeps attacking after being bitten severely. When that happens, the predator's risk assessment calculation shifts. The question changes from "how do I subdue this?" to "how much is this costing me?" A hyena that sustains bites to its inner thighs or groin is sustaining injuries that affect its ability to run, to hunt, to compete within its clan hierarchy. An injured hyena in a clan structure doesn't just suffer physically, it loses social standing, it loses access to kills. The ripple effects are significant. At some point, the calculation becomes obvious. The honey badger, this 12-kilogram anomaly, isn't worth it, and the hyena leaves. Now, the question some of you already have: what if it's not one hyena? What if the honey badger walks into a clan? Documented encounters between honey badgers and hyena groups do exist. They are rarer, and the dynamics shift, but perhaps not in the direction you'd expect. A single hyena in a clan operates under social pressures that don't exist for a solitary animal. Approaching the honey badger first means absorbing the risk first, and in a matriarchal hierarchy where status is everything, sustaining injury from a creature this small carries social cost. No clan member wants to be the one visibly losing a confrontation with something that weighs less than a medium-sized dog. Field observations have noted that in group encounters, hyenas often circle the honey badger, make feinting approaches and vocalize, but the coordinated simultaneous attack that would logically overwhelm the badger often doesn't materialize. Each individual waits for another to commit first. The honey badger, continuing its relentless forward posture, exploits this collective hesitation. This isn't unique to hyenas. The same dynamic has been documented with lion prides facing a lone honey badger. The mob advantage evaporates against an opponent that doesn't respond to social pressure, threat display, or pain signal. The honey badger's aggression isn't just a survival mechanism, it's a social disruption tool. Here's what stays with you after studying this interaction. The spotted hyena is, by almost every biological measurement, a superior animal. Its jaw can process material that no other land predator can. Its social intelligence rivals primates. Its endurance on a hunt can stretch 30 kilometers at sustained speed. It has outlasted ice ages, mass extinction events, and the collapse of megafauna ecosystems across 3 continents. It is a survivor of almost incomprehensible resilience, and yet in a one-on-one confrontation with an animal, roughly 1/8 its mass, its edge dissolves. Not because the honey badger is stronger, not because it's smarter in any conventional cognitive sense, but because it has evolved to operate outside the rules that govern almost every other predator-prey interaction on Earth. It doesn't negotiate with pain. It doesn't recognize the social contract of submission. It simply continues. And in that refusal to stop, there is something that predators trained by millions of years of behavioral coevolution simply don't know how to answer. Nature, in the end, doesn't always reward the largest jaw, the sharpest claw, or the most devastating bite force. Sometimes it rewards the creature that simply refuses to acknowledge that the situation is hopeless. The honey badger never got that memo. And every predator on the African savannah, including the bone crusher, eventually learned to live with that fact. If this sent something cold down your spine, welcome to WildLabX. Subscribe. because every week we go deeper into the parts of nature that most documentaries don't show you.